Okay. Ellen Burstyn, good morning.
Good morning.
What is the Actors Studio?
Well, some of us think of it as a gymnasium for artists, for theater artists, where we go to work out. It's a workshop, and it was established for professional actors. It's not a school in the sense of beginning actors. It's for professional actors to come in between jobs to delve more deeply into their craft and explore areas of their talent that they might not have an opportunity to explore in the commercial theater, play roles that they might not get cast for, and to grow. It's a place to grow artistically, to develop your virtuosity.
Do you remember the first time you ever heard of it?
Well...
And what drew you to it?
I can't remember the very first time, no. I came to New York from Detroit, where I grew up, in the 1950s. I think about 52 I arrived in New York. And it was, you know, the most famous, not school of acting, because that doesn't quite describe it, but source of acting development. And I heard about it, I investigated it, but I was a little afraid of it. I didn't feel ready to go there, and in fact I wasn't. So it was not until 1967 that I finally felt that I was ready to audition for the studio. In the meantime, I had been working as an actress. I had studied with various teachers, and I had developed to the point where something in me said, now. And so I went to Lee Strasberg, and I started studying with him in his private classes. And then I did my first audition for the studio, and I was failed, my preliminary audition. And then I did another one and was passed. And then around that time, the California branch opened, and I was in California, and I auditioned out there and got in. So that was 1967. If you were serious about acting, there was no other place to go. Kazan called Lee Strasberg the greatest acting teacher of the century, and I'm absolutely convinced that's true. He certainly was for me.
What made him the greatest acting teacher of the century?
First of all, he had a very keen perception. He could see into you. He could see where you were locked, or where you were stuck, or what areas needed to grow. I'll give you an example. The first time I worked for him, I wrote about this in my book. My memoirs are coming out this month. And the first time I worked for him, the first exercise was to create whatever you have for breakfast. Whatever drink you have for breakfast, orange juice or coffee or a cup of tea, to create it as though it were there. So I created a mug of coffee, and I was busy working on it, feeling the weight of it, feeling the temperature, feeling the size of the cup. And I felt him look at the cards, because he always carried cards with each actor's name. I could see in my peripheral vision he was looking at the cards for a name. And then he said Ellen, and I knew I was about to be x-rayed. And he said, "Do you ride horses?" Now, a question like that from left field, you know he's setting you up for a good one. I said, "Well, I used to ride quite a bit." I went on working on my cup. And he said, "Yes, keep on doing what you're doing. Just answer my questions." He said, "Did you ride well?" I said, "Well, yeah, I rode pretty well. I had my own horse." And he said, "Well, you don't have to ride that cup." And I was stunned. He said, "What would happen if you made a mistake? Go on, make a mistake." And I started crying. I can't tell you why. I started crying, and I cried for about 2 weeks. Now that kind of perception, he went to a internal fear and habit in me that I was unaware of, that he could see, that made me address in myself, what am I afraid of? Why am I afraid to make a mistake? Why is it so crucial for me to be perfect? When of course I'm not. And in exploring those questions, it opened me. So the next time I worked, I was a different actress. I was willing to make a mistake. You have to be willing to make a mistake to go to areas that you've never been to in yourself. You have to be willing to show who you really are and what's there.
Was there a sense among the actors at the actor studio that you were in a special place?
I don't know. I don't know. You mean that I was, or we all were?
That you all were, that you were all part of something that's special.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yes, I mean, the dedication to the Actors Studio is enormous. I mean, because of what we've gotten from it. I mean, when we go to the studio, all of us who had the great privilege of being developed by Strasberg and the other teachers too, Sandy Meisner and Bobby Lewis and Kazan when he taught. We all know that we have a life that we would never have had without it. We have a development as actors, as theater artists, but also as human beings that we never would have had without the exposure to these incredible giants. We give what we can now, we share what we've learned, and we're dedicated to it because we know how important it is.
How do you feel when other actors who don't pursue the method system, I mean, there's a famous, I suppose it's true, I don't know that it's true, that Olivier said to Hoffman on Marathon Man, when Hoffman was doing what he had to do to get into the scene, and Olivier standing there rather blasé says, "Why don't you try acting, dear boy?"
You know, Dustin appeared recently on our show Inside the Actors Studio, and he talked about that. And he said he and Olivier had an incredible relationship, friendship, and he had deep admiration for Olivier. And Olivier was very caring and tender and respectful of him. And that happened within the context of Dustin was going through a horrible divorce. And he was torn up. And he went out the night before, stayed out too late, drank too much. But he knew the kind of scene that he had the next day. So he didn't think it would interfere, that it would actually help it. And when he came in suffering from the divorce, from his hangover, from what he'd been through the night before, Olivier said that to him with such care and tenderness and love. Don't put yourself through this, Dustin. You know, just try acting. The story's gotten distorted in a way that is completely lacking the context that it happened.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah, completely.
Just a little bit.
Well, but you know, because people so unconsciously go to the negative interpretation. You know, it takes some generosity to listen deeply to what was happening there. I was so glad when Dustin told that story, because it makes much more sense. You know, it wasn't said in a blasé tone of voice at all. It was said with compassion.
Because that's entered into sort of cinematic folklore, that incident, really.
That's right.
In that way. And if it was completely, really the opposite,
Completely.
it could have been cleared up earlier, couldn't it?
Well, you know, Dustin doesn't do interviews very often. It was very rare when he went on Inside the Actor's Studio, and he was so brilliant. I know I'm giving a plug to another show similar to yours, but
No, it's the Actor Studio. I revere the Actor Studio series.
have you seen Dustin's?
No, I haven't.
Oh, well,
No.
it's just
I don't get it live.
so great. It's amazing. He spoke about acting in a way that really, really clarifies exactly what the process is. And I understand it was so successful that he's been asked to write several books. and I think he's going to write a book now. And certainly he will write about that incident in the book, because it's just a totally different quality to the incident than has been repeated over and over erroneously.
Who or what inspired you to become an actress in the first place?
I think the first time I ever went on stage was in school when I was 7. I was away at boarding school. And I think I liked the attention then. I think it felt good to get that approval. And as time went on, like in high school, I found it was something I could do. I think any artist, whether it's a musician or a painter or a writer, is born with innate ability. And that becomes what leads us on toward our destiny. And it's just what I could do best, what I enjoyed doing, and what I seemed to be able to do fairly easily without too much angst. So I followed that path. I had no idea when I started out that I was going to become the kind of actress I became. I mean, my childhood inspiration was Betty Grable, you know. I wanted to be the kind of actress that got to wear pretty clothes and with feathers and sequins. And, you know, I started out as a dancer, and I thought I was following that path. And then one day, it just opened up in me. I knew that there was a deeper level of what I was doing than I knew how to do. And I had to go learn about it. So I closed up shop in California and went back to New York and went to Lee Strasberg.
Once you started working, were you looking for certain kinds of roles, or how did it work for you?
No, I was looking to be able to bring a certain level of reality to whatever role I did. I didn't care if it was a comedy or a drama or a television show or a film or a stage play. I just wanted to be real. And that's what Lee taught us. He didn't teach us to act as though we were real. He taught us to be real. And to be real, it was necessary to truly investigate the nature of reality. Because so many of us live in an illusion of reality. You know, so many of us are sleepwalking through life and acting out our habits, you know, our conditioning, our programming. And he taught us how to wake up.
Did he use the word acting? Did he say this is bad acting, or was
Never.
In fact.
No. He never talked about. He talked about reality. finding what is real in us, in the character, in the role, on stage. And that's a very deep search.
Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. You won the Oscar for that, didn't you? Best Supporting Actress.
No, Best Actress, not supporting.
I am going to get down on my knees and apologize. Best Actress, take 2. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Uh-huh.
You won Best Actress for that.
Yes, I did.
And one of Martin Scorsese's earlier films. Could you tell us a little about working with him at that point in his life and your both careers?
Well, I was shooting The Exorcist, and as the dailies were going into the rushes, were being viewed by Warner Brothers, I got a message from them, from John Calley, who was then head of Warner Brothers, that they'd like to do another film with me. And they started sending me all of the scripts that they had on their shelf. And it was 1973 or 4. And it was right at the beginning of the women's movement. And all of the scripts on their shelves were, the female characters were either housewives who were supporting their husband, the hero, who was going out and saving the world, or they were whores, or they were bitches. They were all the stereotype of the female pre the women's movement. And I was just awakening to the women's movement myself. And so I said to them, I would really like to do a film about a woman as I understand women to be right now, at this particular point in history. They said, great, what do you want to do? And so I went looking for the script, and I found Bob Getchell's script, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And I sent it to them, and they said, fine, we'll do that. And who do you want to direct it? And they suggested several people. I said, no, I'd like a new director, somebody who's at the beginning of their career, who's exciting and wonderful. And they said, who? And I said, I don't know, I'll have to find him. So I called Francis Coppola. I said, who do you know that's a director? I need a director who's new and exciting. He said, why don't you look at a film called Mean Streets? I said, all right. So Warner Brothers owned Mean Streets, but they hadn't released it yet. And I looked at Mean Streets, and I asked for and of course I was very impressed. I mean, it was the first time I saw Bobby De Niro and Harvey Keitel and Marty's incredible camera work and texture and the quality of the acting, everything about it I loved. I asked for a meeting with Marty, and we sat in John Calley's office, and in walked this nervous little Italian guy who perched on the edge of his chair. And I said, I really liked your film very much. I love the level of reality. It's the level of reality I want in this film. But this film is about a woman, and there was only one female role in your picture, and I couldn't tell from that if you know anything about women. Do you? And he said, no, but I'd like to learn. And I thought that was a really incredible answer. So we went to work, and I think we both learned a lot working with each other.
That period, say 65 to 77, it gets interpreted from many different points of view. They look at it as it's all drugs and sex, there's the political movements going on. What was it like to work and live through that period?
Of course, we had no idea that we were working and living through a period that would later be called the golden years of filmmaking. It was a very exciting time. From this perspective, of course, I see what we were doing there and what's been lost from the creative experience now in films. The films have changed a lot since then. At that time, we actually had the possibility to have a script that we really liked and have a budget that was reasonable and have actors who got paid and worked in collaboration with the director. Films like The King of Marvin Gardens, I don't know if you know that film, that was destroyed by the critics, but now is being hailed as a great classic, as well as The Last Picture Show and Alice. Even The Exorcist, which was a much larger budget film. But there was what I can only say, honest creative effort. And it wasn't about technology or what can be accomplished mechanically. It was about the living moment of reality that we could bring to whatever scene we were doing. I had the great gift of working with Friedkin and Bogdanovich and Bob Rafelson and Marty. And I treasure that period in my life. It was very alive. Yes, there were a lot of drugs, but not in the films I did and the people I worked with. I wouldn't say that it was a major factor. There weren't. I mean, there were certain directors like Hal Ashby, for instance, who was kind of known for really psychedelic use of drugs, and I don't know how much was on the set because I never worked with Hal Ashby. But the directors I worked with, if they were doing drugs while they were working, it was after shooting it, at the end of the day, not on the set. I think the drug use escalated later when they started killing crews by working 15, 16 hours a day in television. And the crews were taking cocaine to stay awake.
The Exorcist, you've mentioned a couple of times, possibly the film you're most well known for.
I would say.
What was the atmosphere on the set like? What was it like doing it? Did you think it was going to be the success it was? And William Friedkin working with him?
Yeah, that's a lot. I've written about all of this in my book, so it's all very fresh in my memory. It's such a big subject. It's hard to narrow it down to a small piece here. It was a huge event in my life, huge. The making of the film had so many mysterious and frightening aspects to it. It was as though we were playing with fire, and it's inexplicable the number of tragedies that occurred during the course of the film, and it's not anything that I would have any real theory about, but it was obvious. It was that we were attracting certain kinds of energy. So that was an aspect of it that we all lived through and had to deal with in our own way. I mean, Billy Friedkin started out the film from a very psychological point of view. And in a very short time, he was having each new set blessed by the priest of the set, because it got very scary. Billy was, of course, a master craftsman. It was challenging to work with him. He was helpful. Sometimes he was distracting. I don't think anybody could expect it to be as successful as it was. I remember the day it opened, sitting in my kitchen in Los Angeles, having my early morning coffee, and the TV was on, and I looked up and saw this line of people in Montreal in a blizzard who had been standing in line for 4 hours before the theater opened in a blizzard. And trying to wake up with my coffee, I remember thinking, what on earth do they expect to see? You know, what could be worth standing 4 hours in a blizzard? And they were going to stand there longer. The success of it was just beyond anybody's expectations. I remember I had a really funny incident. I heard about people fainting in the movie. I always thought it was in the demon parts and the really scary parts that they fainted, but I discovered when the real fainting occurred, I was shooting Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore in Tucson, Arizona, and The Exorcist opened in town. So I invited the cast and crew to be my guest and come to a screening and have a little party afterwards. So we went to the opening, and during the film, at the point where Linda Blair gets a needle in her neck and the blood squirts out, that's the part where everybody fainted. It was at the medical procedures, not the demon. And this woman ran up the aisle and fainted and collapsed on the floor. And I, without thinking, jumped up and ran over to her. And I took her hand and I was patting her hand and talking to her, and she was about to open her eyes. And I thought, oh my God, if she opens her eyes and sees the first thing she sees is my face, she's going to think she died and went to hell or something. So I quickly called somebody else over and said, here, take her hand. And I ran away. But that's what all the fainting was about. It was the medical procedure, not the demon.
Why did you say yes to doing the film?
Why wouldn't I? I mean, of course I would want to do it. It was the acting coup. I mean, everybody wanted that role. It was a very successful book. Billy called me and asked for a meeting, and he had just seen the Last Picture Show, I believe, and something else, maybe The King of Marvin Gardens. And he asked for a meeting, and I said, all right, but I find meetings in offices very uncomfortable. Do you mind coming to my house? And he said no. I don't know where I got the nerve to say that, but I did. And he came to my house, and we had a long, about an hour-long conversation. I was very impressed with him. He's a very cultured man. He knows a lot about literature and music and art, and I thought he was really wonderful. So I told him I was interested in doing the role. And he said, all right, I'm not going to keep you hanging on this. I'll tell you the truth. It's between you and Anne Bancroft, and I'm going to New York to meet her, and I'll let you know right away. So he went on he went to Washington to look at sets, and then he went to New York. And he called me from New York, and he said, okay, you've got the role. I ran into Anne Bancroft at the grocery store, and she looked like hell. I said, Billy, that's not fair. I look like hell in the grocery store, too. He said, yeah, well, these are the jokes. So that's how I got the role. And later did parts that I wanted to do. We exchanged roles many times, and, you know, almost getting this and lost it to the other one. So that's how I got the role. I was very pleased to get the role. I had no idea what it was going to take to sustain for, I think we shot for 8 months, 8 or 9 months, to sustain the level of intensity that was required for the film.
How do you feel today about the new generation of filmmakers? Having lived through, we were talking earlier about that period and all that it meant, and this feeling of it was an age of exploration, that things were being done that hadn't been done before. It was like the possibilities you had as an actress. From then to today, has it gone downhill? Have we lost opportunities?
I think there are some wonderful filmmakers now, and I've worked with two I like very much. Darren Aronofsky. I thought his direction and his writing of Requiem for a Dream was as good as anything I've ever had the opportunity to do in my career. I loved working with James Gray. I did a film for him called The Yards, and he's a very exciting and interesting young director. I think what we've lost is the big multinational corporations taking over the studios, and films being made on the basis of, you know, it costs X number of dollars, the original cost X number of dollars, and it brought in X number of dollars, and therefore this one will bring in, if we do the same thing but slightly different. It's become very mechanized. You know, it used to be that studio heads were movie makers. Now studio heads are businessmen working for larger corporations. I think that's an artistic and cultural tragedy. I think that what Robert Redford has done with the independent film movement has been a big boon for cinema artists, because pictures can now get made on a smaller budget. And that's created a new monster. The new monster is the multinational corporations say, wait a minute, these little independent filmmakers are making films for less money, and they're getting stars to work for them for less money. Why don't we have say, Sony Classics or whatever the branch is of each of these big studios, and we'll make independent, you know, small budgeted movies, and then the stars will work for us for nothing. So suddenly you're getting offers from big studios where they want to work, they want all of the actors to work for the same amount of money and practically scale. So now we have had to take it upon ourselves to say, wait a minute, you guys are exploiting a situation that was created for cinematic artists. Now they're commercializing that very impulse of supporting the cinematic artists. So it's another big business monster that we're grappling with at the moment.
Is it a no-win situation?
I don't think it's a no-win situation. I have this image that just came up. I worked at a small studio in California, and I did a few pictures with them. BBS, they made The Last Picture Show and Easy Rider, and you know, it was the company that Bob Rafelson was a partner in. And I did a few films there, and then they closed down. They went out of business. The studio, which was a small studio right next to Paramount, just sat there empty for a long time. And I drove on the Paramount lot one day, and I looked through the fence at BBS, and the parking lot where I used to park my car that was cement, there was a piece of cement that had been pushed up, so it looked like an iceberg, by this little green shoot of grass that had moved the cement all the way up. And I sat looking at that, at the power of life that can upend this concrete block. And I think the same is true of the vitality of the creative force, that somehow or other the multinational corporations will try and choke the life out of the creativity and vitality of art, but it won't be forever kept down. It'll find another way to push up that block of cement so it'll thrive. I don't know how, but I have faith it'll do it.
I think that's as good a point to bring this to a conclusion as any.
Okay.
Ellen Burstyn, thank you.
Thank you.